From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy-watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, tonight it's episode 64, and we're talking about the science fiction film Awake. It came out 2021. In this episode, we'll reveal what we thought about the film, the ins and outs of the narrative and the film language, plus a deep dive into a specific piece of science that the filmmakers are proposing. Awake was directed by Mark Raso, and who also co-wrote this with Joseph Raso.
His son, his dad?
I have no idea at this
husband?
point in time. Maybe. Brother?
Hopefully not all at once.
Well, Mark and Joseph could clear that up for us, couldn't they? Sorry.
I think we should probably phrase that question politely, though.
Yes, I would.
Might be awkward. Turn back now, though, if you haven't seen this film, because we're going to be talking about it.
Warning.
And then tune back in and listen to everything we have to say, because we're going to say the most amazing, brilliant things.
Yes, we are. We're going to deep dive onto Awake. So Awake basically is about a global electricity disruption event that knocks out not only the technology we have around us, but also our human body clocks so that we can't sleep. Awful. And then it is
It's
a race.
called having a baby.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same as being a dad. And then it is pretty much a race against insanity, because if you don't sleep, you're going to go insane, kicking in to see if we can find a cure. So what was your number one takeaway from Awake, sorry?
My number one takeaway is don't bother trying to use science to convince a church full of people.
No, I wouldn't.
It's not the right place.
As someone that was born and bred and wrenched their childhood through one of the major Christian religions, I can tell you, do not try to critically discuss things with these people. They bring out guns.
They don't usually shoot you in the head. But
No, they don't. Well, I don't know what church you went to.
Metaphorically, they might shoot you in the head.
Yeah.
Metaphorically.
Yeah. They're very close-minded. It's quite a scary scene, that, isn't it, in a way, in this film?
Oh, I loved it. In my little notes, I wrote down "talking sense in a church!" ! And then I watched it the next couple of minutes and went, oh, okay.
Oh, yes, all right.
Okay, so Mark, though, was this, and this is going to be an interesting one, hope, warning, or experiment?
I'm putting this into warning, which is a story of a cautionary tale. And the main reason for that, I feel, is that, you know, we have this event happen that is outside of humans having any sort of control. So we have this global, you know, catastrophe, electronic event, whatever it is. It's not really explained at all, is it? And I feel like then the film is a warning, because it's kind of like, well, we can't do anything about that. But then the warning is actually then how humanity responds to that. So when you think about our other ones of hope or experiment, quite often, like hope, there's something that is hopeful out of it. To me, this film didn't really have a theme of hope, like, because and we're getting right into the crux of this film in a minute, but realistically, the key character, Jill, defends her children, but everyone else kind of just goes psychotic, you know?
It does, except...
I don't feel like there's any real hope here. And then in terms of experiment, again, well, it could be an experiment, I guess, but then I suppose the experiment... it's more of a warning to me, because it's just like, well, humans are going to end up acting in this psychotic way if they're pushed to this extreme.
Okay, well, hear me out here on hope.
Okay,
and the reason this was hope is I'm going to call it a
Give me
dark
some
hope. This whole film is a metaphor for looking inward, metaphorically dying and being reborn.
Oh, okay.
They use religious imagery here on this, and so you know I don't like it.
Go for it.
It's also a common theme carried through many spiritual traditions, not just Christianity, for example, but the idea of death being not an end, but a rebirth. It's a chance. It's a metaphorical process of shedding the past and enjoying the future.
Okay.
And it again, this film, I feel it really points out this idea that when we're made to be forced awake, we can't literally sleep. We realise how we were never actually awake. The pastor in the church says, today we have to be woke to survive. And you're like, yeah, it's kind of poking a bit of fun at the woke culture or notion. But it's also pointing out the fact that these people haven't really been awake.
Yeah, they're being closed-minded.
Like they think that they've been, they think they have been sleeping and being awake, but really now they're awake, and they still haven't learned.
Yeah,
it's not, and all right. And it's through the death.
Getting deep, sorry, getting deep.
Through that death and transformation. The character Dodge, he talks about destroying books because it's the problem is that you get taught all these wrong things, and then you continue all those wrong things because they're in a book. Yeah, which I disagree with him, of course. 1 + 1 is still going to equal to 2, whether you put in a book or not.
Don't burn the books.
I do totally get where he's coming from here.
Yeah, I do too.
You entrench a way of being within society. You create a culture.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only way, he said you can change all that in one generation if you destroy that. If you
got rid of all the knowledge that we already have. Yeah.
Clean slate. And so what he's really talking about there, he is talking about the death rebirth cycle.
Yeah.
And you've got these other things like the use of ayahuasca and peyote and various other similar hallucinogenics or spiritual awakening drugs and ceremonies, which are effectively this death.
Yeah.
And in that, I see hope here, which is to say that, a lot of people went cuckoo bananas. But the people we were following that were representing us in this film, they did die and were reborn and were able to appreciate, they really woke up.
Yes.
They had been asleep all this whole time. The time that they thought they were awake and couldn't sleep, they were actually asleep.
Yeah,
After dying, they woke up.
I suppose now that you've just said it that way, I still don't necessarily agree with hope, but our main characters, they all wanted to live on their own journey. Like, they all wanted to create their own path. Yeah. Whereas, like, all those people in the church, they wanted to sacrifice the girl. Yes. So they wanted to sacrifice someone else for themselves.
Yes,
very selfishly.
They wanted some external...
They wanted, whereas our main characters, Jill and her son and her daughter, and even then the scientists were the same. They wanted to sacrifice, the other woman and find out what they could from her to save themselves. Yes. Whereas Jill and that actually wanted to they wanted to find a cure. Like, they wanted to actually...
Well, Jill wanted to sacrifice herself.
She wanted to sacrifice herself to save her children. Yeah.
Which is that nice shadow or echo of the pastor saying, when someone says, we should sacrifice a Jesus. Yeah. We sacrifice Jesus. And he says, no. God sacrificed himself to save his children. Yeah. And I even made the note here of Mum trying to sacrifice herself for her children. Yeah. As this mother God figure. But anyway, that's
okay. Well, there you go.
We'll get more into that.
We're disagreeing for once. Sorry, there's a bit of a disagreeing there.
I certainly do see it's hard to pull hope out of that film.
Yeah, I found it hard. I do like this analogy you're saying, and that now that you've just said it your way, I think it is an interesting metaphor. Those sort of paths that is it. I mean, you're calling it dark hope.
Dark hope, because it is. It's sort of
like hope punk. What we're talking about,
yeah, it's sort of a grim hope. It's not the sort of hope. Yeah. Because ultimately, you look at the extension of just this one woman and her 2 kids are the only ones that we know of who have survived. You got to imagine that there's so many people in the world. There would have been so many circumstances. How many people would have been in that same situation? Like all those car accidents and things. How many other people would have had to have been resuscitated afterwards, after one of those accidents? And there would be isolated people about the place.
Again, it's the zombie apocalypse. There's always even if it's only 1% of the population, that's still quite a lot of percent, right? Yeah. Like, and in that chaos of everyone's car shutting off. Yeah, there would have been a lot of car accidents, and they implied it a little bit at the hospital. You know, either someone coming in, I think they had their arm sawn in half or something, or
snapped through.
Yeah, so, but you could imagine, like, imagine if you were drilling something at that moment in time, or you operating really heavy machinery and the power went off, like there would be quite a good chance that there were a lot of people were injured at moments in time, right? So, or died. But then the but to that, which also brings me back to why I don't think hope, is that not everyone could be resuscitated.
No,
you couldn't just drown everyone, because there is an age thing with resuscitation. There's also just a life force, thing. It just doesn't work on every single person.
Yeah, sometimes you can't control it well
No.
enough.
I know in movies that the flatliners, which we might have to look at some point, that idea of just jolting people back multiple times, or there's a point that doesn't actually work medically, But anyway.
You never know that first time. You can't control it well enough.
No.
Like, if you do it to someone and you manage to get it, you might be able to find the parameters well enough to do it a couple of times.
Yeah.
But there's still a wear and tear factor.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's also, might be measuring the wrong parameters. You might think body temperature, this, heart rate of this, this amount of this drug, this amount of this electric current. Oh, turns out they weren't it at all.
No.
The fact that they had drunk a cup of coffee just beforehand is the thing that let you do it last time. This time they were a bit sleepier.
That's right. So you're saying a bit of dark hope. What was your first impression watching Awake? Were you awake?
My first impression was, it was very interesting, this mystery. It came in quite quickly. So I think it came in about the 6-minute mark where they had the car accident.
Yeah.
Which, straight up, you could tell something funny had happened because the sky glowed. I think... the psychiatrist later on mentioned that they think it was probably a solar flare.
Yeah.
Again, it was never anyone
totally
saying
explained,
it was a solar flare, but it was probably. So something happened about the 6-minute mark, and this mystery straight up was like, what's going on? How is this evolve? I know it's called Awake, so I know they're going to be awake, but how does this evolve from here?
Yeah.
And I was hooked right up at the front as interesting character at the start.
Yep.
And I was watching it here in my studio while the kids were trying to be going to sleep. And the kids were mucking about, so I stopped the movie partway through, went into their room thinking, I'll just ask them nicely to be doing whatever. And they had made an absolute mess of the room, and this doona was bundled up in the corner, and I couldn't handle it. Suddenly I realized actually I was really tired. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't think straight. I picked up this doona and wanted to straighten it out, and I couldn't figure out, and I was like, I just didn't have the energy or the mental capacity
to keep going. This
is not a person I've not been awake for 24 hours
or
3 days or however long they're going in this film, up to a week or so. So when I sorted them out, got them into bed and came back and sat down, I had this new appreciation. Went, oh, okay. Yeah, it's true. When you start getting low on sleep, you freaking can't deal with things.
No.
The bigger thing, as the guy says, what's his name? Bill in the... Brian? I think his name is Brian, in the
scientist guy?
In the church. And he says, in fact, the more worked up you get, the more swelling you get in the brain, and the harder it is, to do
think
anything.
Clearly,
So you got to keep calm. And I realised that's exactly it. It's like, I went in and the kids kind of got me a bit worked up because they were meant to be going to bed and they weren't. Well rested, this wouldn't have fazed me much. I would have sort of taken a deep breath and went, oh, okay, and started listing out all the things I had to do.
Yes.
I hate it when I do that. Because I just sit there and just list. First, you have to both do this. We've done it. Then you got to do this. Then you got to do this. He's okay. Well, do it. Start doing it. I'm going to keep going until you're doing it.
It's a weird thing, sleep deprivation, isn't it? Because you can kind of you can physically function on so many levels, but then you also can't. And I will say, to me, it was something that I thought was quite nice in this film was as it progressed, Jill, in particular, our main character, you could really see her digressing. And I really liked that, and I mean, I do wonder how much you could explore that in a film or in a story as well. And I think it was nice that they made it that. And when she finally makes it to the hub, in other films we have a main character break into a science lab and they put on the doctor coat and they pretend to be a doctor, and it's all in this film. It was really, I thought that was kind of cool that she kind of walked up and she put the doctor's coat on, and then someone's like, "Hey, that's my chart," and it's like, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah,
and you can just see, like, because the other guy's really tired too, so he's just kind of going, yeah, give it back to me and I'm going to move on. Like, whereas if it wasn't about being tired, they would be like, oh, show me your ID, or who are you,
Hey,
or what was your
what are you doing
qualifications,
here?
what are you doing here? And I really liked that, and there was a few moments as the days went on that she was digressing and her functioning of it was digressing, and that was kind of cool, eh?
Yeah. How did they make you feel though when you're watching through? Like, there's some high points and low points.
Yeah, well, I think you and I have talked about having children, and it made me remember having babies and lack of sleep and that sort of functioning, and you are in a survival mode. And I think maybe some people could watch this and not quite connect to that, or think it maybe gets a bit too far-fetched, but to me I really liked that digression of her, and also the fact that it was interesting, wasn't it, like really quickly how quickly society in this film became so violent. Like that first night she rode off to the uni and there's like people screaming on the street, and when she got to uni, everyone at uni's having a party, and then it was like the next day, then with her and her son, they're like walking down the alley when they found the dead policeman, and then like you're like, no, this is serious. Like, it wouldn't take long for people to suddenly start to break down, right? Like, and that was even before the church scene where we had, like the policeman going, no, we should, and even when that woman in the church says, we should sacrifice her, like, no one would really, they wouldn't say that normally.
No, that's crazy.
But after 2 days of no sleep, suddenly that seemed like a rational idea. And, that's what the scientist guy was saying. Like, we lose our critical thinking and we suddenly become very irrational. And it was really interesting. I could imagine writing this story, like you could really push that in different elements, and I think they did that quite nicely.
Have you found, like, particularly say with kids, if yourself and your partner are both well rested, you have really good days. Like,
yes, that's right.
No problems.
Yep.
If one of you is just really tired, then you compensate for them, and
that's true.
You're extra quick to get the kids quiet and moving. Yeah. Because it's hard.
Yeah, and you might take them out.
What are the days like where you're both fucking tired? You're both like at the end of sleep. You've had 2 hours of sleep for the past 3 nights.
It's hard. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. The phone rings and you're both kind of looking at each other and going, shut that fucking thing up.
I know, that's right.
What the hell? Yeah. And you're trying to make decisions, and then your kid's got a temperature, or the kids complain, so you take the temperature and you go, hang on, 36 point... Is it 6? Is that good, or is that hot?
Bad?
Hang on. Kids have a different temperature. Are they a bit hotter or a bit?
Yeah.
And you can't. And so you end up calling Health Direct, and the health person. So have you taken it? And they're really good. They've obviously dealt with tired parents.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Have you taken the temperature? Yes. What did it say? 36.6. That's good. That's okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
If it goes to 36.9, get back on touch with us.
Yeah.
Okay. 366 good? Yes. Fine. Done. Hang up.
But
kid, you're going to sleep.
And I remember that you do things like, it's like I've just got to get to the train station, so I'll take it easy in the car. I'll get to the train station. Get on the train. I just get on the train.
Yeah.
Get on the train to go to work. Just sit on the train. Just sit. You can close your eyes.
Oh, I slept past my station.
But you know what I mean. Like, you're not thinking about anything else apart from, like, I just need to get on the train, and then I just need to get off the train, and then I need to, like, walk 20 steps. That's all I need to do.
My morning train ride is when I do my writing, and I get my computer open and I've
stared
at it for a while. And the times where I'm too tired but I'm awake enough, I just close it down again and just put on some music.
Yeah. And
I don't even bother trying to listen to audio books or anything like that. I just put on some music and sit there. And I slept through, like. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's a 50-minute train ride into the city. And I slept right through. So I must have got a good 45 minutes sleep, like on this train.
Best sleep
and
for years.
I woke up Leaderville, so on the other side of Perth.
Yeah.
And I looked up and went, oh, what station is it? I don't recognise this at all. And like I saw Leaderville and then went, oh, is that... Jumped off the train, had to catch the platform back. I felt a lot better for having had a good 40 minutes sleep.
You'd had that 45 minutes sleep.
But yeah, you're not in any good position.
And did you have a favourite scene in the film, Surrey?
Yeah, I did. I really liked the church scene that devolved nicely, and
It did.
It upset some of my ideas of what was going on there. So the church scene is the little girl is down in the basement supposedly sleeping, and it's a bit of a weird thing, but the pastor then, and it's easy to sort of frame the pastors and people of religious authority as bad guys. Like, it just is, because I suppose when you're talking about spirituality, you're talking about heaven and hell and sin and forgiveness and so forth, there's a lot of power in that. So it's very easy to make these powerful figures bad. And I was expecting him to, but he was really good.
Yeah, he was.
Like, he was really reasonable and really trying to present a rational religious view or spiritual view on this. And the confrontation then with Brian, I think his name was, a scientist, who then explained this thing, and the people started to sort of listen to that, but you could tell they kind of didn't want to.
No, well, they wanted the girl, right? Like, they wanted... Yeah.
It wasn't appealing to their base instincts. It was appealing to their rationality, which they didn't have any of.
No, they were losing that.
But then the pastor was able to, no, let's sit down. Come on, we're still talking about this. This is cool. God works mysteriously, and he's miracles spread, and that sort of talk, which to me is sort of like, what nonsense are you peddling here exactly? I mean, I'm willing to take you a certain philosophical direction and go with you on that, but there's a point where you're just going to go, okay, that's just nonsense.
That's right.
And so I really like that tension where, in fact, the reverend, the pastor, he was actually a good guy out of that.
Yeah,
and he was trying his hardest to work through his problems.
Yeah.
And then there was actually, of course, the other authority figure, the police officer, who then started shooting people.
Yeah.
Because hand on heart, if I'd been awake for however long, and they said that the symptoms seemed to be progressing faster.
Yes, they did.
So they'd been awake for about a bit over 24 hours.
But it was speeding up.
And it was speeding up, and if I was pissed off, I know that there'd be certain times where I had a weapon, I'd lash out with it. Yeah. Not because I consciously or rationally wanted to, but it's just that thing, like when you see a little kid with a stick, they're not intending to hurt anyone, but they're thrashing that stick around, and then someone annoys them, they hit with the stick.
That's right.
Because that's what they're holding.
That's right.
And that's what happened. So yeah, it was a great scene in that one.
I loved how that woman sort of said, let's sacrifice the girl. Yeah, like it was so sort of out of left field, but very appropriate for how everything was getting heated. But it was a really great way of raising the stakes suddenly, and you're right, like the pastor, quite often, the pastors aren't necessarily... Sometimes the pastors in stories are more about ramping people up, but he was actually trying to calm people. I'm thinking, I'm kind of on your team, like, calm them down, calm your people.
He's a really nice guy.
Yeah, he seemed to be really trying to say, no, we don't need to do this. If he had lots of
good sleep, he's probably like a really good pastor.
He probably is,
He'd probably give good advice. He'd probably be very supportive. It's just, rob him of sleep and make him crazy, and his best just isn't good enough, I'm afraid.
That's right. And it was that Simpson lynch mob thing, where like, let's rip a lip from them.
Well, yeah, could you imagine if, as I said, when you and your partner are both tired, but could you imagine if all of society was like that?
I know.
You'd go to
everyone's on edge.
They're not trying to walk through the supermarket. And, when I'm really tired and there are people, like, standing right in front of where I want to get...
Yeah, you kind of want to kick them in the face, don't you?
I just want to grab that thing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm not browsing.
Move,
get
people.
Out of... But if everyone was like that, there would just be mad, riot.
And that's what I meant before, like chaos ensued very quickly. Why is this film a science fiction, Surrey?
It's a science fiction because central to its premise is the scientific notion... And progression of lack of sleep. And they didn't really bother telling us how the sleep got stopped.
Yeah.
But it was just, and that's one of these things with science fiction is it's usually you jumping off point. You go, okay, this is the underlying assumption.
Yeah.
What is the logical scientific progression of that?
Yeah.
As opposed to a fantasy, which is like, here is a world which is just different from ours. Yeah. And here is how it progresses under the rules of that weird world.
Yeah.
Whereas in the science fiction one, I think it's better to look at saying, here's the starting point, and here is now a rational series of processes, which is more in step with what we understand to be rational within our worldview.
Well, literally, that Brian scientist guy sort of said, "Oh, you know, what did he say? Something like 48 hours, you're going to lose a lot of critical thinking, you know, and but then 72 hours, you really start seeing other things. You start seeing hallucinations, and then maybe at 92 hours, you're going to pretty much be on the floor, kind of rolling around, but then what about after about a week? You're probably going to starve to death. Like your body won't even, your brain won't even be able to function to eat anymore, and so you're just going to be lying there." And really, we don't know then what would happen. Like hypothetically, as scientists, we can think this is what's going to happen. Your brain's going to slowly shut down, but we don't really know what that would look like on a mass scale of society. Because you and I, as parents of babies, can have no sleep, and society keeps functioning normally because not everyone in society has the
Other
baby at
people
once.
pick up the slack.
Yeah, you know.
As
but
I said,
what
your
happens
partner
if
doesn't get the sleep, so you're the one who jumps up and does things quicker because you know it's not going to work otherwise.
Yes, and not everyone is hopefully driving around with such a lack of sleep. So generally, it's pretty safe, you know. And so, but that's a funny thing, isn't it? So they've taken a science angle and just run with it.
And again, this is one of those things, if you tried to take that being awake out of it, well, you wouldn't have this story.
No.
The story wouldn't exist without the crazy.
That's right.
Like, that's what it is. So that's the other part of it, being science fiction and not just, you know, cops and robbers in spaces, which I always say, you know, because there are plenty of shows or movies that are just basically an ordinary story set in an extraordinary moment.
Yeah. And just on that, I think that's what makes this film a little bit of a hidden gem because, you know, it is like the zombie end of the world apocalypse scenario, but I haven't seen this scenario before.
No,
you know, I've seen other films where, you know, we flatline people and I've seen other films where maybe there's, that alien invasion and everyone's dead apart from 1% of the population, the zombie sort of story. We've seen multitude versions of that, but I haven't actually seen this hypothetical situation. Like, what if humans could just not sleep? Like, what would happen? And we see this breakdown of society very quickly. So, to me, it's a very little sneaky gem, this film. And online, you can go online, like, people... It's not getting the best ratings straight away. I mean, I don't think enough people have probably seen it yet to really pass that judgment, but I think it's a little bit of a hidden gem. So it's well worth going to look at this because it's giving us a different world, really, like a different scenario.
It is, and I think that it was well delivered.
Are you up to anything science fiction related or creatively yourself?
I was involved in that photo shoot we did. That was pretty cool.
We did do a Space Brains photo shoot. We got modelling.
And just before we started recording this, we did a bit of a dry run-through of a new short format Space Brains type show that we're playing around with, the notion of having a multimedia sort of situation. Yeah. Or maybe it's better multi-channel.
Yeah.
Is the way you term it. So
I think that's more millennial, sorry.
A short version of I'm looking at short films. Yeah. Presented as both audio and video in different channels.
Nice.
So yeah, we did a bit of a read through that, and that seems like that will probably work. It needs the script needs a little bit of cleaning up. Mark needs to actually watch the film. I was putting words in his mouth.
Yes.
But that were good enough words.
They were great words. I didn't mind talking your words through me mouth. Space.
God, the names were okay.
Yeah.
Like, they all worked out.
See, I need words sometimes, otherwise I say mouth space.
And how about you, dude?
Well, editing, Harold, the Plumber short film, which has a little bit of sci-fi magic in it. But yeah, so deep in the throes of editing that. It's slower because of those little babies that we talked about earlier as well. It's just been a bit slow. And also organising things with Space Brains. It does feel that the film festival's starting to kind of snowball a little bit. So
we've got a radio interview next week.
We do. We've been lined up with a radio interview. I do think as well there'll be some information about Space Brains in the press. I did a whole bunch of sort of press releases and reaching out to a whole bunch of West Australian media, and there's still a few other sort of film media I'd like to reach out to. So yeah, just kind of stay tuned if you are following us. I think there'll be some, larger spread of the Space Brains Festival.
Feel free to share the news as well.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
We want films submitted. We are a bit greedy and selfish that we want to see the best that people have to offer.
Yes.
And the worst as well. I mean, that's where creativity and innovation comes from.
Yes. And, and also just writing as well. They're the two things that I'm up to, writing. And I did like, again, this film being a different scenario. So it's kind of, again, you do watch things like this and you think, oh, yeah, okay, that's a different angle, I like that. What about the film festival, Surrey? When's that happening?
May 21, 2022. It's a Saturday. It's at the Mandurah Performing Arts Centre where we did our photo shoot. So jump onto our various social medias and so forth and see some of the pictures. The beautiful theatre at the Mandurah Performing Arts Centre. Little space brain totem mascot. It's good. I'll be updating the website. So I guess by the time you're hearing this, the website will have been updated. So have a look at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're out there and you want to make a sci-fi, go for it. We are getting a few questions about what is sci-fi. And for us, it's all about that speculative science. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, you just joked, sorry, about being a Western in space. Well, it could be a Western in space if it's got an element of science in it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, could you very much imagine cowboys and robbers in space?
Yep.
But... it's possible for people to hack someone else's body.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the murderer was actually, not the one who committed the crime.
Yeah, that's
exactly
exactly
an interesting crime to do, and it has that element of science fiction which you wouldn't be able to replicate that story without that little bit.
That's right. So as long as it's got an element of science, it could be superhero, it could be aliens, it could be, time travel. It could be, an alternative universe idea, but as long as there's some element of science, we think it fits into the sci-fi realm,
I think so.
But, your idea could be a romance, a melodramatic romance, a bit like Metropolis has that melodrama in it, but there's a whole futuristic world being played out, right? Yeah, it becomes a sci-fi. So I think that rolls in. So let's get stuck into the plot and some of the details of Awake, sorry.
Certainly it is. So Awake 2021 on Netflix, directed by Mark Raso or Raso?
Yeah, I don't know. Not sure.
Mark, get in touch.
Get in touch.
Written by Mark and Joseph Raso. I think they're no relation. I think it's just coincidental. I mean, I come across 20 Rasos every day.
Do you? Wow.
No, it stars Gina Rodriguez.
Who, look, I just want to say that I didn't know who she was. Did you know who she was?
This is one of those ones where I recognize her and I'm going, where have I seen her before? I've seen her in... And then I left it hanging, not sure where I saw her in.
So apparently it's a TV show, hugely successful, called Jane the Virgin. It hasn't been in my kind of realm,
not where I've seen
but that's her huge claim to fame. I mean, she's been in all sorts of movies and stuff, as well as maybe minor characters, as far as I can gather on IMDb. But her big thing is she's the key character from that. I mean, she's got 4 million followers on Instagram and Facebook and all these kind of places.
Way to go, Jane.
And yeah, she just seems to be a superstar. So good on her.
Well, we'll get her on and ask her some questions about this.
Yeah, hopefully. But I think she delivered really well as Jill, the mum. She was really tough. She had an edge to her. She was an interesting look as well as the character. She's not that traditional, white American middle-aged mum, No. So definitely had a diversity to her in a really cool way, I thought.
Ariana Greenblatt as Matilda. Do you recognise her?
Yeah, from Love and Monsters, right?
Yes, we saw her just not long ago.
Yeah.
Although she was a bit grubbier in that one.
She was. Frances Fisher as Doris, Shamia Anderson as Dodge, Finn Jones as Brian, Lucius Hoyas as Noah, the son, Gil Bellows as Dr. Katz, Barry Pepper as the pastor you're just saying.
Oh, yeah.
And I do recognise him from a whole bunch of stuff, right? And Jennifer Jason Leigh, good old going back to the 1980s there, sorry.
Yeah, Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
That's right. She's still at it in the acting game, and she plays kind of an interesting character here as Dr. Murphy. Sebastian Piggott as Clarence. Sort of takes out our key cast. This was filmed completely in Canada, Toronto, I believe, and it is a Netflix film, so it's been supported by Netflix, funded by Netflix, and doesn't go to the cinema, it goes straight onto Netflix.
There are 2 films on Netflix called Awake.
There we go.
At present.
And we're looking at
the 2021
2021 one.
They're no relationship to one another. It's purely coincidence. Although I think it's a bit unfortunate Netflix has both of them on. So when I did a search for Awake to watch it, I had to check to see which one we're talking about.
You watch the other one and it's all about literally awakening to new spiritual realms. You're like, why did Mark pick this? What's going on?
That's a bit strange.
It's not even sci-fi. So, let's get stuck into how this film rolls. So, look, the opening image is an interesting one of this. It's sort of this weird white circular light that kind of pops out. And then we have, actually, it's a reflection in the puddle. And she puts her footprint into it and keeps walking.
You've talked about this before. What is water symbolic of?
Yeah, well, transition, in
death.
between lives, death, can be the afterlife.
Telling you that they definitely playing on that in this movie. They could have hammed it up a little bit more.
At the end, she is drowned as well.
Yep.
So at the start, she walks in a puddle, and then at the end, she's drowned to be rebirthed. So
and her recovery of that, of course, the camera's upside down, looking at the reflection of her in the water.
Yes,
it's just like you've opened my eyes to the whole water.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll come to it in a minute, but the car accident, they go in the water, don't they? Multiple
sink in the
things.
water, and they rise up.
She rises
born
up
into this new world.
Yep. So that's I thought it was a really interesting opening image, actually. So the setup, we've got Jill Adams. I like this setup. So she's she's a bit of an oddball. She's like a middle-aged security guard at a university campus or a college, but she's bribing the other security guard to get access to their disused drugs or their expired drugs or whatever, and then she's on selling them.
I was confused about it because she picks up an old cup out of the bin.
Yeah. But it was because she was hiding the money from the cameras, I think.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Did I look away at the wrong
You
time?
might have. It's kind of really quick, I think. So I think that was the idea, is that she wasn't giving him the coffee cup. She was giving him like $20 or whatever.
It didn't make sense to me. I was like, she put the cup there and I thought, is that like to make him like let her in? And then like, he's going to go, oh, fuck. She's giving me an empty cup. What a funny practical joke.
Yeah. No, she had some cash inside of it.
Okay, I must have looked away. I'd done something funny.
Yeah. Anyway, and she's kind of mysteriously hiding in this building, but she's getting the drugs and she's on selling them. In that next scene, she's a security guard, but I think it's obvious in that opening scene that she's not supposed to be in that space.
No, because initially she's security guard, and my little note says, she's walking, she's a guard. Oh, no, she's breaking in.
Yeah.
Because she goes a bit dodgy and then sneaks in, and you go, she's nicking the drugs.
And then when she goes to sell the drugs, the drug dealer's, of course, dodgy, and he counts the pills. He's saying there's not enough, and then she counts her money, and there's not enough. So
he says, count again.
So there's kind of a bit of, she's being undercut. She rocks up at her mother-in-law's house, where we learn that to pick up her kids, Noah and Matilda, but she's under some really strict rules with the mother-in-law.
Yeah, and I think this, though, was the save the cat.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, we're showing she's a bit dodgy. She's bribing people. She's nicking drugs, selling it for cash.
Yeah.
But when she gets out, little Matilda, Mummy, and she's so pleased to see her and clearly loving of her children.
Yep.
Which you can't, you have to go, she must be getting the money for her children. Like, there's no way that she's getting that money for something illegal, because she could have just kept the drugs.
That's right.
It was kind of implied that she had problems with drugs. But,
she was doing it for the money.
But
the money was for the
kids. At this point, it's for the money.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the conditions, she had to be able to have money before and a reliable job before she get the kids back.
Yeah, that's right, which is pretty common.
We don't go into that. We just know that her kids are kind of being kept off her.
Yes. And, the father... she's a former US Army sort of medic, and obviously that hasn't kind of worked out. It's not necessarily the best thing. Maybe she's left under sort of certain circumstances, and she is also a recovering addict. So with the mother-in-law, that kind of, that you're talking about setting up the key character. You're right. Like, it's like, she's a bit dodgy. She's a drug dealer. but then it's like, oh, mate, she's probably doing it for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also even to save the cat, when she takes her kids and they get in the car and they're driving, like, no other teenage boy, he's very distant from her. He's quite aggressive. She's trying to be a nice mum. You know, she's trying to show... It's not, it's just like gets in the car, turns on the stereo, bloody kids. She's like trying to make an effort and he's not. So, again, saving the cat, she's trying to be a good mum in their circumstances. Yeah.
And they're driving along, minding their own business, and this is this scene is kind of I want to say it's commonly used, the sudden car accident.
Yeah.
And there's actually that movie. Did you watch Shazam?
No, I haven't seen
so
that.
Shazam's not at all science fiction in the slightest.
Yeah.
But they play on this sudden car accident where they're driving along, the driver in Shazam is distracted, and you see an oncoming truck, and the car, and you like just avoids the truck, and then you go, okay, now they're going to lose control because they dodged the truck. No, they got around that fine, and then you just go, oh, and then they get T-boned from a T intersection, which is exactly what happens here.
Yeah,
you sort of they're talking, and Matilda's like, yeah, stop your fighting. And she looks out the window and sees the sky go orange, and then they just get hit out of nowhere by a car, and they're flipped into the pond.
Yes.
And the water starts pouring in, and Noah's like freaking the fuck out.
Yep.
He hasn't watched Mythbusters, obviously, because the correct way of doing it is to stay calm. And either...
Easier said than done, I think.
Wait for the car to fill and then open the door, or open the door early and get out.
Yeah.
They got out, and it was a bit of a concern. Was Noah going to die? And at this point in the film, it's entirely possible that one or both of the kids could have died.
Yeah.
Probably one of them in order to spur on some sort of inciting incident, And as it turns out, they get up out of the water and there's Noah. And you think, oh, okay, Noah's fine. But where's Matilda? She's up on the bank, as it turns out, because I thought, oh, why did Matilda have to die? But she's up there. She gets resuscitated by some cops.
I just want to, before we go any further, the camera in that whole sequence is a really nice way of showing that part in this film. So, I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you could set up the camera, but the camera is kind of in the back seat of the car, and we've gone from a nice kind of close-up. Exactly, again, this film doesn't spell out the solar flare or whatever, and there's arguing going on, and the Matilda's looking out the window and her face lights up. But so the camera goes from that, and there's just one continuous shot, like when they get T-boned, they go into the water. So we are, as an audience, in the car, and I know that's been done before, but I thought they did it really nice this way, because then as the car is sort of slowly filling up, the thing is we don't really see Matilda. So there's, it's all Noah and the mum and the seatbelt, and they're trying to, as the car's filling up. And the cameras are disoriented. They do that a couple of times in this film, actually. It happens again later. Yeah. And so, obviously, the filmmakers decided to sort of do that a little bit and play off that. And the whole point is to bring us into that action, that point of view action, like we're in the back seat. So the car starts filling up with water and we're panicking a bit because we're stuck in there too, So I really liked that. I thought that was really... And also then when Jill frees Noah and you sort of see him get out, she kind of gets sucked down a bit with the car. Then she comes out and it goes to that aerial shot of her emerging, like you said, birthing out of the water. But there's no Matilda and there's no Noah. So again, it's like a bit of suspense for a moment, and then Noah pops up, and then it's like, oh, but where's Matilda? Oh, and then the cut is, oh, the police have got her and they're trying to resuscitate her. So I just really liked that. I thought that was a really cool kind of sequence with the camera. Yeah,
so they have to go to the hospital because, Matilda has just been resuscitated. She was only out for a minute. Yeah. Which is interesting because that is a phrase that gets used later. But she's out for a minute, and Jill has got a cut on her head. Yeah. And so they say, you better go to get some stitches. Yes. And so they're wandering along because they're noticing all the cars are all stopped. Yeah. Many of them crashed. And you got to think of how bad are all these drivers that they just crashed. But I don't know, maybe it was a bright flash in the sky, distracted. People might have that sneeze reflex, and everyone sneezed all at once. Could you imagine the whole world sneezing all at once while driving? Chaos.
That's right. I suppose the thing is, if your car loses power, do you have some cars might not brake straight away, or
Yeah, you might have
I don't know.
problems.
Yeah,
Or maybe the cruise control goes a bit haywire. Maybe it doesn't just shut off. Maybe it revs and then stops. And
that's right.
who knows?
But there was a lot of chaos. So the hospital was in chaos. The city started to look quite chaotic. There was some spot fires, that kind of stuff. They learned in the hospital, but that the coma patients have all woken up.
Yes, they've all woken up. It's like, oh, it's a miracle.
Yeah, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. But
so far.
the music tells me it's not a miracle.
No,
Sorry, there's some pretty deep, dark,
A
mysterious
deepening mystery here.
They return home to their mother-in-law. She kind of gets them to come in, and it's heading into night time, and so they're all going off to bed. There's a beautiful tracking shot here of Jill lying on the couch or whatever. It's just coming slowly down her, and you can see she can't sleep.
Yeah.
And this, to me, is the inciting incident, because we're about right bang on 12 minutes anyway. But, yeah, it's basically saying, well, she can't sleep.
Yeah, in fact, as Milo notices, at 11 minutes,
Yeah.
she can't sleep.
Yeah.
Little girl, we pan across to Matilda's having a bit of a snooze.
Yeah.
Noah, though, he's sort of up. He's a bit anxious. He's sort of staring about the place. And we do see there's a bit of meditation, and does it help? Well,
Yeah.
I like to think so. And it's, there's... Oh, here's another mention of the minute. You know when you first wake up in the morning and there's just that 1 minute
Yeah.
where everything's okay before all the shit in the world hits you.
Yeah.
So there's, again, like, Matilda was only dead for just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was meditating, and she says in the morning when you first wake up, you have just a minute.
Yeah.
And then I think there's the pastor who telling the story about how he overdosed.
Yeah.
And he was dead, but just for a minute.
Just for a minute, yeah.
So it keeps being, there's like this just for a minute.
That's
as if
fair
this
enough,
is
yeah.
this repeating sort of theme, which is nice. And what I really loved was the son was sitting there going, oh, he's looking at the sky and goes, oh, look at the meteor shower. And I had two thoughts flashing. The first one was like, I wonder if that's part of the flash in the sky.
Yeah.
Is that what they're doing, like Day of the Triffids or type of thing?
Yep.
And then I thought, no, that's the satellites that got all fried and they're all falling out. And sure enough, Jill rocks up, and you can tell she's a smart cookie because she looked up there and went, no, they're satellites. And, I felt pleased that I'd got that. So, but it was a nice little feature there that, even if the very next night everyone got good sleep, the world would be set back so far. It's like all your GPS is gone, global communications are gone. Like, you couldn't be, the global internet would just about be broken without the satellites. Like the pipes that we have laid, the cables we have laid for the internet are supplemented with satellites. And there'd be just our weather tracking, our weather stations would be almost useless. Be a lot of lost things, and not to mention the poor old ISS people stuck up there in the space station. That would not be good with no electronics or computers or thrusters.
They'd be slowly
they
being
would,
pulled back to Earth.
They would drop to the ground relatively quickly.
Yeah. So we have this debate happening now in the story where Jill can't sleep, no one can sleep, the daughter can sleep. The mother-in-law asks her for sleeping pills. She's like, well, no, I don't actually have them. So it's... Yeah,
mother-in-law, so it's kind of like, you got a little something.
So maybe... But then what's nice about that is like, so maybe she's not so stuffed up, after all.
Yeah,
maybe she is actually recovering. Because, of course, there's always that doubt on anyone that's recovering from drugs or alcohol or whatever. And the satellites kind of fall into Earth is like, well, how bad is this going to be? That's what I was kind of picking up from that. Jill goes off to work and observes... This is sort of, to me, was quite nice as part of this debate that... pretty quickly, she's riding her bike and, there's cars parked everywhere. There's a couple of spot fires going on, but there's a lot of... It was all about the soundscape here, and I think this was a really clever way. Like, we don't see anything, really. We see people on the street. She notices people, and obviously none of them are sleeping, but you just sort of hear, like, screeching and then screaming, and then I think someone's like, oh, will someone stop him from doing that? So it's like... Really rapidly, it's not feeling very safe. And then when she gets to the college, all the young people, of course, are partying. And so they're treating it like a big rave or whatever. And the drug dealer rocks up to her and he's like, oh, everyone wants zombie pills. Everyone wants to be awake. Everyone, You know, it's like,
sleeping pills,
you know, it's like
downers,
anything to kind of like, you know, knock it out. People play double.
I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah,
which is good because he's obviously lack of sleep
Yes.
is affecting him now. He's not as sharp or witty as he was earlier.
But, you know, he's happy to pay, and she's like, yeah, sure. And then with that, so she enters the building to go steal her drugs with the military rock up in cars. And you're like, hang on.
The security guard's not there. She doesn't have to...
Yeah, no, she doesn't have to deal with that.
She just picks the key straight up. And she gets the big bag of drugs out.
She's going to just take everything.
Yeah, and then we hear the sound of motors, which is unusual because we know that someone had said that EMP, like they were debating, was it the... Oh, yeah, EMP is not
terrorist
for everything.
attack or whatever.
There's a terrorist attack in the hospital.
Yeah.
Guys, the terrorist attack. Oh, do you think it's the Chinese? Well, they've done this. And you're like, yeah, that's like, without lack of sleep, people start jumping to those conclusions quickly, but most people aren't carrying on. But yeah, it's much quicker here that the people are jumping in and like, yeah, because the Chinese turn everything off like that. Doesn't really suit their agenda very well, but you know, let's go with it. And in works Dr. Murphy, and also in work the soldiers, and point guns at her and say, what are you doing? And she says, you know, Alpha Whiskey 68 of the 2nd Battalion Platoon,
Pineapple
blah, blah,
platoon,
blah,
something
pineapple
like
or something. Rhubarb. It's not important what she says.
No.
But she clearly says some identifying signal in military talk, which puts the soldiers at ease. They go, oh.
Yeah.
And then she says, oh,
You speak my language.
Yeah, I'm off duty, out of service, but if the reserves have been called up, I haven't heard. And in walks Dr. Murphy, who sort of walks up, and they clearly know each other.
Yep.
She looks at Jill and says, oh, that's a lot of drugs, which again is that sort of little dig at her past.
Yep. And they've got an old woman who can sleep, and so they're going to test on her at this place called the Hub. They're going to build a hub. You know, and they're all in a hurry. They're gathering the research. They're gathering resources. And Dr. Murphy actually says, "Oh, do you want to come to the hub?" And Jill's like, "No, I'm going to look after my kids and stay."
Yeah.
And that's when it's a nice moment, isn't it? Because she's kind of like, "God, oh, here's the details of the hub. Well, you're not interested. I'll give it to the next guy."
Yeah. There you go, Brian.
Brian. And Brian's like, "Oh, yay, pick me, pick me."
Well, it's quite a terrifying moment there because Brian talks to Jill and says, hey, you really should consider this. We've got like a real chance here. Something big has happened. You don't understand.
Yeah.
Everyone has stopped sleeping. This is a global phenomenon.
Yeah,
Everything has stopped sleeping, and we're all going to die if we don't start sleeping. And then Jill says, "No, don't be silly. My daughter was sleeping."
Yeah.
Because she's at this stage probably still thinking, okay, she didn't get good sleep, but it's probably not uncommon for her. She has troubles.
Yeah.
She works night shift anyway, so she has problems. And then Bryce says, "No, are you sure?" "Oh yeah, she was in an accident earlier, but well, nobody is sleeping, so I don't know that she was sleeping." And of course, my stomach sank, and I thought, "Oh, is this the we're talking about catalyst inciting incidents and the chapter, the Act 2 decision." I thought, is this what they're going to use to
the daughter's actually
leverage,
dead,
dead or coma or something dreadful.
Yep.
And so Jill goes, and runs. She scurries home and she's like, what's going on? Where is she? And she's not in the bed. And then Noah, infuriating teen that he is, again, lack of sleep as well. So she's like, where is she? Well, geez, calm down, Mum. Geez, calm down. Like,
Mum.
And like, you're sitting here, I was sitting there as an audience member going, Noah, it's Mum, and her daughter could be dead. What the hell?
Yeah. No, she's just at church.
Mum, Nana took her to church. And eye roll. Oh, God. And church is not where I would choose to go.
Not in those moments, but the mother-in-law has. And again, this is the thing. People do weird stuff, don't they?
Yeah, well, that's where she gets comfort.
That's right. Yeah, seeking out comfort. And we cut then to this pastor you were mentioning before. He's quite a passionate man. He's talking about, the privileges of God and the sacrifice of God and the way they have to stick together and these are the tests of time or something, doesn't he? And then he has a moment with Matilda, in the basement. He's kind of talking to her and. Yeah,
she's his story about being a drug addict.
Being a drug addict and dying and then coming back and
he was reborn like Jesus. Not that I'm comparing myself to Jesus.
No, that's right.
But it was an interesting to bring that thought into my mind that I died like Jesus and she died too.
Yeah, but his point, and then it's important because that was what I was saying earlier, like his point wasn't so much like, let's all go crazy. He was saying, no, Matilda's a good example of hope because she can sleep. Maybe the rest of us can sleep, just as an example, like Jesus was an example to live a morally, ethically good life. Like, you don't have to be Jesus, but you can follow that as an example. And maybe Matilda's the same.
Well, yeah, okay, well, let's sacrifice her then.
Let's sacrifice her to the gods.
I'm pretty sure that's what God wants. Child sacrifice.
Okay.
Actually, I've got to say one bad thing that isn't in the Bible is I don't think any child is genuinely sacrificed in the Bible. There was some that have been commanded to sacrifice and they were going to do it, like, where you got to ask yourself, like, really, do you really want to follow a God that commands you to sacrifice your own child? Like, but he I think there's like, is he Saul, where he's going to kill his baby, and then God says, no, mate, just kidding, just testing you, making sure
you would do it.
I'm omniscient, I can see everything and I know everything, so I knew what you were going to do, but you have free will. But I still know everything. My plans are unknowable.
That's right.
Yeah, he's like,
but I wanted to test you.
Don't even bother trying to think that one through. That doesn't.
Oh, jeez! So you got really close to killing the baby.
Saul's little bubby Isaac is like, Daddy, really?
You just imagine God sitting back there. He's not going to do it. I know he's not going to do it. He's doing it. Oh, no! Stop!
Just testing. Yeah,
I go to the bathroom for a minute, Saul. I mean, jeez.
Mum walks in. What are you doing there, Isaac, again? Are you trying to sacrifice him?
Trying to drown him
God
again.
wants me to sacrifice him. Every Sunday afternoon, it's the same damn thing. God tells me
to this time?
him.
Drain his blood. What is it this time? Put him in the river.
So I think maybe Saul was the one at fault there. He gets a bit carried away. Maybe he hadn't had enough sleep.
So Jill and Noah and the psychologist are racing to the church, and this is the street. There's a chemist saying, "Look, I don't have any downers or whatever left," and people then
you need a doctor's certificate.
you need a doctor's certificate, but then people start smashing into the chemist, and then at the same time, there's people fighting on the street. There's people fleeing a scene, and then they come down this alleyway, and they find that police officer who saved Matilda. He's dead. He's been killed. And the psychologist kind of says, this is only the start. It's only going to go downhill from here. So it's a good sort of raising the stakes, I think, into that.
Tell you what's what. Yeah, it tells you what the stakes are. Yeah, it's like, this isn't just, people are a bit grumpy.
Yeah.
This is everyone is grumpy, and they're making everyone else grumpier.
Yeah, and they will start murdering each other. People will just start murdering each other. So when they arrive at the church, Doris doesn't want to actually give up Matilda. The people are panicking, and the psychologist tries to ration. And I like this because it's a good speech that I've said as a teacher, which is critical thinking is so important.
Yes.
And that's basically what he's saying. He's like, critical thinking, people, critical thinking. You're all right now wanting to sacrifice a little girl to a so-called God. It's not critical thinking. You're not thinking through the whole thing. Let's all just take a deep breath. And there's a really poetic moment where he's like, just if we all just breathe, get some more oxygen into your brain, it'll be okay. And with that, the cop is like, nah.
Yeah, he was almost convinced, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he convinced us. He convinced us. That was the point. Nah. I'd just rather sacrifice her. That's an easier option.
And this gives us this cascade of events where finally people sort of broken out of the thing, and Mum, what was mother-in-law's name? Was Doris. She runs off with Matilda.
Yeah, and the lynch mob chase after the pitchforks.
The mob chase after, and then Jill goes after them.
Yeah,
and quickly Jill notices that Doris doesn't have Matilda, so she goes back up and finds Matilda.
Yeah.
And we get that little escape where Noah has got the coordinates.
Yeah.
And Mum is we've had this revelation. We've had the stakes have been made. We've been told here's a direction you can head.
Yeah, the hub. You could go to the hub.
We could go to the hub.
Yeah.
So we're heading, and this is all the hallmarks of Act 1 coming to an end.
Yeah.
Because it's that question, will you go to the hub? Will you pursue this chance? And I love that Noah, in fact, even says, we've got no other opportunity here. He threatens to burn the thing. And he says, wake up, Mum.
Yeah.
And again, which is because obviously they're all been asleep. And there's been a couple of these sort of wake up moments here where people they're not seeing things the way they should be, so it's a great metaphor continuing on.
And I guess that's the thing. Even at the hub, the people are going to be awake, but then if society's this dangerous, like people like at a church are willing to kill a little girl, and we can see the cops being murdered, it's like, well, if you go to the hub, it's militarized. You might just be at least safe there for a little while.
Yeah.
You know, like from the outside world. As the outside world breaks down, that could be a little sanctuary. So even if they don't get a cure...
They might have that answer.
And then within that time, they might get a cure. So, yeah, you're in the safest place.
And so she decides to. They steal a car from the drug dealer's workplace, which is a mechanic shop.
Yep.
But the drug dealer's been shot. He's still alive. He's not... Or he's been bashed in the head and he won't go unconscious.
No.
And the two other less savoury chaps are trying to steal a Camaro and a Dodge.
Yeah.
And Jill nicks the keys, and so they go, screw it, and they grab the Dodge and go chasing after a
supply run. Yeah,
Jeep full of equipment or something, medical supplies or something, and then they go off. They do the road trip, and so we're hitting that fun and games where we're traveling through rural Canada, I suppose, to sort of see what the world is looking like and how things are going, and they're heading off to the library.
They do. They come across a bunch of naked people.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty cool.
That was cool, I thought, yeah. And
they grabbed the gun off the criminal guy who had the Camaro. He got in an accident.
Yep.
And I marked the naked people as being sort of the midpoint.
Yeah, right.
It struck me as being, we've now reached peak crazy.
Yeah, we're getting to a creep.
They just come along, and they're just on the road. There's all these nudists just staring at the sunrise.
Yes.
And you think, oh, what crazy is going to happen here? But they just drive slowly through, and the people sort of step out of the way and let them on their way. And I went, okay, we've now seen everything. We've seen the violence. We've seen, even the violent people being car accidented.
Yeah.
And now we've seen, I don't know, some people who are just like, I don't know,
they're just
worshipping the sun or
worshipping
something.
the sun, yeah.
We've hit peak crazy. And so I was thinking that's kind of, we're coming to that middle inflection point where things are going to get hard. They've got a direction to go in. They've started going. Things are going to get hard.
Yeah, that's fair enough. When they get to this library, they're looking at trying to figure out how to get to the hub. And there is a nice moment there that you're probably right, heading more to more bad things happening. Is that Jill starts teaching Matilda things, and
she telling her, "You got to learn how to read. You got to read
this
the library because when I'm gone, you got to read. Don't stop reading.
Just keep reading because you'll learn things." And then she's like, "Oh, shoot the gun!" And there's a little nice moment here that Matilda doesn't want to shoot the gun, and she does. Jill fires a couple of times, and then Noel comes around and is like, "Well, you shooting at me?" And I liked that because I reckon that's what. When you talk about lack of sleep, that's exactly what starts to happen, isn't it? Especially in couples and in families and that. It's just kind of like, are you having a go at me? Are you really... Are you? And it's so easy for people to kind of get worked up over the littlest thing, But it's also easy for someone to be lack of sleep like Jill and go, yeah, let's practice shooting here. And it's like shooting towards the direction of a family member. And so... And they played off that a little more a couple of times in this film, and I liked it. It's just a nice little thing. We knew that she wasn't trying to shoot Noah, she was just trying to practice. And maybe Noah was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's like,
I thought you were in the car. No, you told me to look at maps.
Yeah.
Well, then who's in the car?
Yeah.
You're like, well, nobody's in the car.
Yeah, that's right.
But then, we've seen the zombies come out, or actually the red-suited prisoners. But they're staggering out like zombies. It looks like a horde of zombies is spilling out, and that... It was almost like a Bollywood dance scene was about to start. All these brightly coloured people all coming out in formation, and then they form into a grid and start moving about.
But it's always a good omen, isn't it? Because it's like, oh, they're obviously prisoners. They're obviously bad people.
Oh, they must all be. They must. They're going to
cause more. They all deserve to be in there. They're in their orange jumpsuits. So now you're in real trouble.
Now you're in real trouble. Yeah. And one of them sees the car.
Yeah, and runs to the car.
Matilda is sleeping in the back of.
Yeah, he runs and jumps in the car and takes off in it.
Mum comes running out, and she's quite upset.
She is.
And I have to say, I really liked this because I was like, oh, God. What? Yeah. They keep using Matilda as being this horrible catalyst for, possibly bad things, but of course, bad things don't happen to Matilda, which is nice.
But it's also interesting because these prisoners come up, and I think that's the thing. You've got one guy that's taken off in the car with Matilda, and then this guy comes up, and he's like, "Oh, give me the boy.
Yeah, give us the boy.
Give us the boy." And you're like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that." Like you expect the girl. Like, it's the real stereotype, isn't it? The pedophilia, it's going to be a little girl. And then these other guys are like, no, we want the girl, we want the boy. Well, no trouble, just give us the boy. The
interesting thing was, it was just that one guy, and the other prisoners were just kind of...
watching, I suppose.
They weren't stopping anything.
No.
But you've got to wonder, like, what they're thinking. They're like going... they're probably thinking, this should be amusing to see how this turns out. She's got a gun. And so they're all sort of standing there, and she fires it. It scares him, and a bunch of the prisoners go, no, that's too much for me, and they run for it. But then she realizes it's out of ammo.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
But then the prisoner who took the car turns up and says, hey, Mum, get in the car.
Get in the car, yeah.
Which I thought was really nice because it's like, I think it's more realistic. Like most people, even criminals in prison, are actually relatively reasonable people. Like,
they will be,
You do get a number of...
You'll get a sociopath in there somewhere.
Psychos and so forth. But even like people, for example, who get done robbing a petrol station...
Yeah.
Like, they're not doing it because they're evil people who want to hurt people.
No.
They're usually doing it because they feel they desperately need a bit of money.
Yeah.
Possibly for drugs, possibly because they don't feel they've got any other way of getting money.
Yep.
Or they owe money, but they're not looking to murder a small child or something dreadful. Like they're just getting by in life, and they did something that was illegal.
Yeah.
And who knows, this guy, Dodge as his name was, we don't know why he was in prison.
No.
He could have been in prison because he was...
tax evasion.
Smoking pot or tax evasion.
Yeah. Doesn't necessarily make him an evil person.
He could have been in there as a holding process for a trial that was upcoming.
Yeah.
And turns out he was innocent. Who knows? We don't know.
So they fang it off out of there. They get away from the other actual criminals.
No, all the
bad ones. And they discover a plane wreckage, and they're kind of like hunting through that wreckage. That was a pretty cool scene, Like, it was a really sort of epic. You could see that the plane has hit the ground and, grazed along. I mean, that's another area, isn't it, that the film doesn't even focus on. Of course, when electronics went out, all those planes in the sky would have fallen.
Well, yeah, combine that, then you'd think there would have been an attempt to land as gracefully as possible. But, you're not going to really be able to.
No.
But add to that lack of sleep and judgment, and there probably would have been some airplanes that could have landed, like, some nice smooth water and just... splashed along and been ripped to shreds. I don't think it's not exploded.
Yeah, it's also not that. It just depends where you are geographically, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if there's no opening, there's no opening. So I saw that movie Scully, and he lands on the Hudson River, and that took a lot of effort.
Oh yeah,
that took a real lot of effort. And they didn't want him to land, and. Anyway, that's a whole nother film, not sci-fi, but...
It's possible, but you're not doing
quite
it with
dangerous.
This sort of accelerated lack of sleep
No.
and no electronics.
That's right.
Because,
no electronics,
fly-by-wire aeroplanes, which, like all those modern air jets and Airbuses and so forth are, you're going to have trouble with. But some of the older ones where you've got hydraulics still and so on, you may be. Anyway, so they driving off, and it's nicer in this car... Jill is initially holding Dodge at gunpoint.
She is, yeah.
And which I thought was a bit unfair because Dodge seemed like he seemed calm and reasonable, and he did come back to pick her up and so on. Like if he was actually had ill intentions, he could have just driven off with Matilda or just kicked Matilda out of the car and driven off.
Yep. But
he came back and picked everyone up and kept them driving.
Yeah, that's right.
And likewise, so he gets changed, and this is where we find out that the gun doesn't have any bullets, and so he hands it back to her.
He does.
But we get a nice... is this where Noah and Mum have a bit of a chat in the car?
Yeah, that's where he talks about the grandma and the books.
Yeah, and it's starting to get a little bit sort of reconciled, I guess, is what's going on here.
Definitely. And that's where then... Matilda's driving, and that he says about the grandma saying if you deleted all the books of a generation, you would start again.
Yeah,
yeah,
and In that car, I would have had to have corrected him. Because he's like, says, yeah, because people sort of say it's true, and then enough people say it's true, then they write it in a book, and then people read it in a book and think it's true, and you go, well, it actually, some of the things in books are true.
Yeah, they are true, yeah.
But I see what he's saying. He's more talking about the way we pass culture along.
Yeah.
So historical things and the ways we are supposed to interact. Funny thing is, tonight my son asked a very insightful question about swear words.
Right.
He said, how come we have swear words if we're not supposed to use them? Like, why did we make these words up that you're not allowed to use?
Yeah.
And then, you know...
That's a tough answer.
Mum just sort of said, oh, well, it's not the same people who made the swear words up as the people who say you can't use them.
Yeah, right.
And someone's son said, oh, so they're just, trying to tell us what to do. How did they know? And sort of left it, and I said, look, you've actually stumbled on a very insightful philosophical point. I'll leave you with it, because I was really entertained by the fact that his little innocent mind had come up with this, like, just like Dodge sitting there going, you're just saying stuff and you're telling us that it's true. Yeah. But why are you telling us that it's true? Why are we continuing that? Why are we doing this, perpetuating stuff? And I agree, because I see stuff like on the news, like you look at the various wars between the factions in the Middle East, and you sort of think the only way that could stop in a generation. Yep. But basically, you're going to have to take all of the things that carry the memory. So all the books, all the media, all the parents and adults and all the rest of it are going to have to either just forget it all, or be moved away. I know you're like, I don't want to say you don't want to separate these kids and parents. It's more the case of you want to do like eternal spotless sunshine mind thing. Right. You want to just sort of go forget about the fact that X and Y tribe
and someone
bulldozed your house. Okay, that's a freaking terrible tragedy. Okay, I don't disagree, but revenge will not get you your house back or anything else. And then when you're on the other side of things, you don't want to keep thinking, well, your people ran my people out of town, and it's like, just someone's going to have to stop at one point. Yep. And you could do it in a generation if everyone just freaking stopped, if they all just woke up. And that's what this movie, as I keep coming back to, why I like the dark hope of this is that if everyone just freaking woke up, and everyone says this, and everyone says, if they all just woke up, and what usually people are meaning, it's a code for if everyone just agreed with everything I said. But what Dodge is saying is, no, it's not about agreeing with what everyone just said. It's the opposite. You've got to stop agreeing with what everyone else has just said and start fresh and start new. Yeah. And that's what happens at the end of this
Which
movie.
is also, now that you're just saying it that way, is also critical thinking. Because that is critical thinking. Yes. So if everyone says the Earth is flat, it takes critical thinking to realise maybe the Earth is not flat. Yes. That's the only thing that gets people out of a bind. Or if your family thinks that we are just all poor all the time financially, and you can never break free of that because rich people steal from the poor, then that's what the family passes down the generations, and everyone in that family thinks there's no way out of poverty, where we are poor, and rich people steal from the poor, rich people steal from society. Now, there might be a little bit of truth in both of those aspects, but if you're locked into that and you can't critically think outside of that thinking, then you can't. And that's what Dodge is saying.
Then it is true.
It is true. It becomes your truth.
Yes.
And then you're right in terms of what this film is saying. It's like, wake up.
Wake up, dudes.
Wake up. Wake up, Neo.
It requires that process of Neo coming out of the bath.
That's right. It's birthing, isn't it?
A baptism.
Yeah, it is. It's a birth. Yeah.
So that's really great. And they're going along. And they do have like another sort of crazy spot where they...
Well, yeah, to me, I thought this was the midpoint, right? But, I mean, you made a really good point about the midpoint, but I sort of thought this was the midpoint. But anyway, Matilda is driving and they suddenly come up on this, and to me, this is a Mad Max-esque kind of thing, right?
They've really just gone straight for it, haven't they?
Before we saw the nude people worshipping the sun, and they were just peaceful and they're fine. Pretty weird to come across that on a highway. Now we're coming across Mad Max. Now we're coming across the people that are worshipping ripping the throat out of your neck, right? Like,
they've already built a trash pyramid on which a weirdly grinning dude is sitting.
That's
whilst
right.
other people are hanging upside down having their blood drained.
Yeah.
Possibly by choice.
Yeah, possibly.
They didn't look to be, I don't know, it was hard to tell whether they were ecstatic or upset.
Yeah, we do, and we'll never know. But they just started ripping in. This sequence is filmed that same way that I was talking about with the car accident. So we've got a point of view kind of camera inside the car, which rotates and tracks around the car as these people reach in and they're smashing the back window and someone's grabbing it and they're fighting. They're all violently fighting to try to get bits of their body parts or whatever they wanted. Yeah, and the car's still moving as well, still accelerating. And so it's a really great camera choice again that we're in the action as it's all unfolding and we sort of circle around each character as they're attacked. But the rest of the action keeps unfolding as well. So I really liked that.
It had
that
a real
display.
feel of a zombie film too.
It did, yeah.
Without the fear of people being bitten and therefore dying.
That's right, yeah. They didn't have to worry about that, but they were being scratched and pulled and ripped apart. And I mean, I guess as well, like you were thinking, well, two of them are only kids, you know. But they survive it. They accelerate out and they get out of the Mad Max Thunderdome.
No, they do. They get past old Max up on his seat of pyramid power.
Yeah.
And drive on for a bit and they come across the lights.
Yeah, they're like the hub.
And she says, that must be the hub. And I had this split second going, how do you know that's the hub? Then I went, oh yeah, it's the only place with light.
Yeah.
Everywhere else has got no electricity.
That's right.
The
military will have electricity, yeah.
Yeah, they've set things up. Well,
but did you notice that she says, do you see that? Do you see what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
Because it could be very obvious to go, I'm seeing lights, but am I hallucinating?
Yeah, who knows? Because she's been testing herself with memorising numbers and such.
Again, that digression of her mental ability was, I thought, a really cool factor in this film.
That was nice.
So anyway, they pull over and she separates from her children. She says, stay here. I may not come back. You know, don't follow me. You know, I'm going to see if it's safe and then we'll come back. I'll come back for you, but don't follow me.
She tells Dodge to get out. Like, where are you going now? Which is like basically saying, you're not coming with us. Which is, again, overly suspicious, I think. Yeah. But lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And the little note I made here, this is the Han Solo moment. It's like, what are you going to do? And instead of him going, oh, thank God you're out of here, I'm pissing off. Like, because you can see he's like, he's got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
Like,
and maybe no one to go to.
And nowhere to go. No one is. So he goes, well, I'm just going to get out of Dodge, which is like a lack of sleep joke.
Yep.
But he drives off, and I thought to myself, okay, mental note, this is Han Solo going, I got my money, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
And then he's going to come swooping back in at the last minute to distract
the
Darth Vader so that Luke can save the day. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happens. He comes in at the last minute, distracts the soldier.
Yeah.
But anyway... But this is the clever, stealthy break-in that Jill does. Yeah. And I love this. It was just like so easy for her because, the military there, they're getting injected with stuff in their neck and they're kind of all amped and shaky. And like, you see the medic, he's like, put it in.
Put it in your neck.
That'll do. That'll keep you going.
Yeah.
And he wanders off and then they go, right, clearing the bridge. And they're still going through all of their military stuff.
Yeah.
But like clearing the bridge, he just walks across the bridge and you're like, Jill's just standing under it, watching them, and she just walks across the river and goes up in, and then overhears them with the code. I've written it down. Like, oh, that's you're bloody smart. 2046. Like, I remember it now. I only saw this movie once, and I remember it all the way now. And I love that. Jill sneaks in and she struggles to open the lock.
She gets 4 of the numbers, I think, or something.
204 6.
Yeah.
And then she has to count individually on the buttons to push. And
But it's also really done nicely that she, again, it's shot where you can't see inside the building, so you don't really know what she's coming across. And then when she opens that door, it's like, oh, it's a full-blown medical facility. There's all these doctors and soldiers and stuff, and it's also kind of complacent, like we mentioned earlier. She
puts on her jacket, picks up a chance. Someone says, hey, That's mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he takes it off her. And he just looks at her and then walks off. And you're like, you can see his processing going, who the hell is that? And he just must end up going, I really don't care.
I don't care, no. I'm just going to... What does it matter?
She's just there in a white coat.
Yeah.
I mean...
She's probably a doctor.
Yeah, whatevs, you know. Like,
There's other doctors here.
And there's she goes in and finds where's the woman, and she gets pointed away, and there's that nurse like at the trolley, like picking up things and looking at them, clearly not knowing what to do. And
still a bit confused.
Oh, they've already does that. Or are you here to take blood? Yeah, I'm here to take blood. Okay, yeah.
Go back to it. And so she goes in. She comes across the older woman that's been sleeping, and she finds her. She's not in a very good condition, and the old woman says to her, like, "Oh, how much blood can you take?" And like, just I'm not supposed to be alive.
I was supposed to be dead months ago.
Yeah, I was supposed to be dead months ago. So, yeah, that's sort of revealing that. Yeah, it's not quite. Maybe she's not the miracle woman. Not
the miracle that we thought here.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Jill at this point is revealing her true plan. She's like, my daughter can sleep. I need you to be there. I need someone to be there when we're all
dead.
dead.
Yeah, I need to be there. Yeah.
Which is still pretty grim, really. Like, I always think, what sort of future is that going to be? This
just one older woman and one younger.
old woman who's clearly struggling health-wise.
But mind you, was she struggling because they were, constantly taking blood from her?
They would not help in the slightest, I have a feeling.
And then Jill is actually seen by Dr. Murphy, and she comes out, "Oh, you're here. Oh, all right, you made it, And she lies that she wanted to be there to help the situation. And Jill pretends that she doesn't know what happened to Brian. She's like, "Oh, do you know what happened to Brian? Brian was going to bring my family."
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, no.
No.
Not here? Didn't make it? Oh." And then Murphy also explains that, well, we've got this drug that helps brain function, but it's slowing the process, but it is also damaging the brain.
Yeah, it's speed and vitamins and some other bits and pieces, you know. It's keeping us functioning, but not very well.
Yeah. Suddenly there's a flare outside the campus or the hub, and she sort of runs out, and there's this confrontation going on. Dodge rocks up in the car with the children, the military. There's a real sort of standoff, isn't there? And even Jill's kind of slammed into the ground. And these soldiers, you can tell, like, we just came from all the doctors and that being a bit confused. They're also a bit confused still. Like, they're not sure.
They're trying to do their duty, but they're not sure what the duty is. They're
Should they just blow
this little girl, Matilda, coming out? That get on the ground, hands over. You think she's like, what, maybe a 10-year-old girl?
Yeah.
Like, even if she had a gun, she couldn't use it.
That's right.
It would like flip out of her hands if she shot it. And and you can see they are sort of struggling with that notion of like.
So it's really dangerous, this scene. Like,
they got a gun in Jill's face saying, "I will blow your I'll shoot you in the face. I will do it." And you're like, "Oh, geez, dude, cool it, man." You can't, because he's freaking jacked up on
speed.
Hasn't had any sleep.
Yeah, that's right.
So who knows? As Jill ends up chained up.
She does. They all chained up. They get all chained up, and the little girl. But Matilda says, "I can sleep," and that kind of breaks it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she is Jill's tied up. Noah's tied up. Matilda is in with the doctor, and there's a great like. I wasn't sure if this has been done electronic, like special effects, or whether it's a puppet. But the chimpanzee was cool, eh?
Oh, the chimpanzee was really good.
It seemed really realistic to me, and they had it sliced open, and the doctor, and also in this bit, the camera is low, and it kind of goes around on Matilda's eye level, but not the doctor. So you just see this doctor kind of off camera.
I made my note there. His head is removed, so it's like it's like these kids' cartoons, Tom and Jerry. You only see the legs, or the Charlie Brown, where the adults, they don't really properly talk.
They don't exist,
and you don't really see their heads. The same, this doctor was talking, you don't see his head or anything, and he's talking about this chimp. He puts ether on the chimp. Well, he relieves the pressure. The skull is open. He says, well, to relieve the pressure, you've got to take the skull off and remove the fluid. But to keep the brain clean, you've got to keep the skull closed with the fluid.
Yeah.
So it's a problem. And then he puts a little mask on the chimp.
And he won't go to sleep.
Won't go to sleep. So that's ether, that just won't go to sleep.
Yeah.
Even with drugs, people can't sleep.
Yeah.
And so then they
test it onto Matilda, and she falls asleep.
And then we see the doctor's face.
Yes.
And he's suddenly now human.
Yeah.
And he's pleased.
Yeah.
But then he's not too pleased because he's getting the notion that Murphy is kind of, again, wanting to sacrifice the child.
Yeah, yeah.
Although I don't think she just wants to sacrifice her to God. I think she wants to basically drain her blood and cut her open and do a vivisection or something.
Yeah, yeah. So Dr. Murphy asks Jill why her daughter can sleep, and Jill begs Murphy to, let her go. But yeah, she's insisting that humanity's survival depends upon her. Dodge is kind of surprisingly taken as a guard.
Oh, yeah.
He becomes a guard and he's injected in the neck with the meth.
Yeah.
Let's give him a shot of meth. And we have this kind of then real dark night of the soul because the older woman who can sleep goes into cardiac arrest and dies. So to me, it was like a really, here's the death of a character.
Yeah, here's a bit of your hope is being wrenched away.
Yeah, because if she dies, and then it's all Matilda. And that follows that then Jill is having these hallucinations that Noah starts to threaten her and then actually wants to kill her and attacking her. And there's a great little scene, isn't it? Because then they, I think Dr. Murphy...
The camera's wobbly and blurry around the edges as well.
And she's being attacked. He's yelling at her and he then jumps on top of her. And then a soldier walks in and goes, okay, Noah, come with me. And, of course, then the camera pans left and it's like he stands up, like he's tied up. He's not on top of her. So she was just hallucinating her. So it shows us how powerful the lack of sleep is now as well, that you start to see yourself being attacked or whatever. He's taken away to see if his brain is any different to the Matilda's. We kind of then suddenly break in the soldiers. One of the soldiers walks along. It's not funny, really, because it's actually whatever. But he walks along and there's a pine cone on the ground and you just hear him go, grenade! And just start firing.
He runs and kicks it away and then opens fire and then all the others, of course.
One soldier fires.
Even if they were well rested.
Yeah.
I mean, soldiers are trained. Like I've got a couple of friends who went to the Australian Defence Force.
Yeah.
And, they do have these training drills where someone will yell at, contact 1 o'clock.
Yep.
And the first thing you do when you say that is you let off a quick burst of gunfire in that direction. Everyone drops to the ground. And then, the support weapon will fire off a few bursts. The idea is to get covering fire to suppress any enemies who might have been trying to ambush you or get the jump on you.
Yeah, right.
So that's kind of a drill that they do, which is they see a contact and then a couple shots, drop to the ground, do a couple of shots there just to sort of establish, hey, keep them down.
Yeah.
Then an assessment is made as okay, do we need to keep shooting? Whatever. And this is only done in areas where you're expecting contact.
Yeah, yeah.
And so these guys here are amped up.
Yep.
One of them opens fire, says, we're under attack, and shoots.
Yeah, so everyone just starts shooting.
Everyone else's training is just like, shit, okay, where the gunfire is, shoot.
Yeah.
The problem is, they're all on meth, and they've all been about 6 days with no sleep at this point.
Yeah.
So their judgment is fairly obscure, impaired.
Yeah, it's not
And
logic.
so they start shooting first of all, they're just shooting wildly into the night, as if they're under attack. But then, of course, the problem is that, another soldier will then come running around the corner and see, we're under attack, and there's someone shooting a gun. Shoot.
Shoot him,
and then, that guy just shot someone.
Yeah.
He must,
Shoot
he's
He's
shot
a bad
one of our
guy.
soldiers. Get him. And so this absolute nightmare scene of these soldiers who are trained to react and respond, and they've obviously just, because they don't have any higher functions, they've dropped into this base level of training, and the soldiers are moving through the compound, clearing the compound. Yeah. Very, very much like Terminators. They're just quick, short, accurate bursts. Brr, 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 brr. And, the guy sort of shoots, he runs out of ammunition, he immediately puts his thing in, pulls his pistol out and starts moving in. All like robots.
Yeah.
And this is exactly how they're trained.
Yeah, yeah.
Except normally they have the higher function to understand when they're in a dangerous situation and when they're still just entering their own base. And
Well, they can't identify who's safe and who's not.
no,
can they?
because
They're just
part of the training is also to do rapid identification of friend and foe. It's like, like you get to recognise what a military uniform looks like and where your people are.
Yeah.
But if you're in this situation, so it was a really scary thing because there was no enemy. It was just an implosion of gunfire.
Yep. And within this, Jill's kind of dodging the violence, and she runs to rescue Matilda and makes it to her. Just as, I think, what was Dr. Murphy? Was she going to cut her open or something? And,
See what makes her different.
Yeah, and sort of like the old scientist, just doctor about to rip her open kind of thing. And
But old Dr. Katz injects Dr. Murphy with the serum, like, because she wants to be injected with serum. So, okay, he does it. But Matilda goes, no, you've got to clear out the bubbles. You've always got to clear out the bubbles. Yeah. And she says to Dr. Murphy, he's killed you. Yeah. And then she's like got her scalpel. And sure enough, she has some sort of, I don't know how truthful it is. You get an air bubble in your brain or your heart.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I wouldn't imagine it's good to get an air bubble. I didn't look it up. But it's a bit of a classic movie trope, isn't it?
It sure is.
I can't think of what other films it's been in, but I do know it's been in plenty.
So then they run to rescue Noah, or find Noah. And Noah's sort of about to be under fire, and then Dodge just saves him.
Yeah, jumps in
and gets shot.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, and gets kind of shot himself. And then Noah's like, oh, these wires on the ground look like cereal or something, doesn't
Fish.
it?
Dad told me how you
fish,
cut a
that's
fish.
it.
You cut it open here first.
Cut a fish, that's right. And he cuts it, and of course he gets totally annihilated.
Yeah, gets thrown back, and then luckily Matilda watched the whole resuscitation efforts and
so
brings the pads over, and they don't clear.
No.
You know how they tell you to clear? Well, apparently what happens if you don't get clear, you all get a bit of a jolt.
You do.
Again, I've never looked up to see if that's true, but I expect it's probably not true.
The thing with those pads is that they're not... I have not been trained on those pads in first aid, but I've been trained on defibs. And defibs, you can, but it's actually almost impossible for you to get any danger from them. And it's also impossible... The funny thing with a defib, and this is valuable advice if anyone is listening, is that really anyone can use a defib. Like you don't,
ones,
you don't have to. And here they're doing those charge ones. Yeah. But my actual understanding a few years ago really shocked me doing the training is that in the movies, they do it. They did it in this movie as well. It's like they go clear 1, 2, 3, bam, and they're like clear again, bam. Yeah. They don't actually work like that so rapidly. Like there's time because you need time for the heart to actually beat. And it's in between, so they don't actually do that in reality. It's much more, like a doctor might do it once, and then they wait a minute, and then they do it again. But in the movies, the drama is joom, 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 and like how they go ramp it up. Yeah, there is no ramp. Why don't you just start on the ramped part? There is no extra voltage. It's just that's the voltage. But defibs themselves, so not those sort of charging ones. You will connect them, and they can't actually run while other people are touching them. Like you could touch them, you could lick them, you could do anything to them, and you're safe. It's got to be put onto a person, and you push the button, and the machine actually says, "Stand clear."
I have a feeling that they've got an old school one.
This is an old military one, yeah.
Like they've had to dig out something like from the 70s or something. Like back when you had the danger knobs.
Danger knobs. Yes. Danger.
They zap Noah, and then they fall back and they sort of phase out. Yeah. And Matilda wakes up and sees Mum with her eyes open, head on Noah.
Barely sort of alive or whatever.
And Matilda notices that Noah's breathing and his eyes moving, and so she wakes him up, and he wakes up, and they're like, "Oh, okay." And
he's actually alive. Yeah.
So Mum sort of goes, "Oh, this is so good," and she's so happy, and she hugs them, and they start packing the Jeep to go, and Mum is bloody useless.
Yeah, she's a potato. She's slowly becoming a potato.
She's useless.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that where is it that Matilda realises Oh, yeah.
Well,
Mum
yeah.
saved you. You were dead.
Well, there's a moment first that the kind of the climax that Noah actually says, his mum was right. He apologises. We shouldn't have come to the hub, and he loves her. So it's a kind of a climax of the emotional story. She's fading. She's passed out. And I think Matilda, they're packing up the Jeep, and Matilda runs past those charging pads and realises, oh, hang on, I was zapped.
She sees the sheriff's badge.
That's right, the sheriff's badge, yeah, and it's a reminder that she was kind of brought back to life.
And Noah mentions that he was dreaming.
Yeah.
And they say, ooh, okay. It's odd that they chose drowning.
Yeah.
Because I guess that was the way Matilda was done, but
yeah.
I would have thought electrocution, like zapped her in the heart. But anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they drive off down and we get
It's your birthing symbol. So.
And I really love this because as soon as I saw them go to the water, it was even like this idyllic, with the lush green grass up to the bank. And it was almost just like one of those, music video clips. Which one is it? Like, I can't remember who's one of the. Was it a U2 one or something where there are people standing in the water and they're wearing the white robe?
Reflection. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So they do like the whole baptism of her.
They do. They take her in, they apologise, and then they drown her, basically.
Yeah, geez, what a horror that would be. And then the screen goes black.
It does.
They're doing resuscitation. And I was sitting there going, oh, how are they going to end this? And then there's just one at the end, the credits roll.
Yeah.
And so that's why I went the hope. If she didn't breathe, I would have gone nuts.
Fair enough. And there is a nice sort of reverse tracking shot of the reflection of the lake coming out of that, and it's very similar to the start in that there's that puddle and the moon reflection.
Well, it's like
in the water,
the spirit world.
Yeah, it's the crossing of the two worlds.
Upside down, looking in the reflection of water.
Yeah,
you're seeing the world reflected off water.
And reflections are always could be the spiritual world, or it could be another otherworldly. It's not real.
So I mean, I personally would have liked a bit more of that sort of life through death, rebirth in there. But I still really liked what was there, and that's what I mean. I sort of think about it. It's just really good the way they brought in the whole, talking about just dead for a minute and wake up, and even that little Dodge monologue, which kind of also brought this theme of change through destruction. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
And I was also then thinking that misunderstanding of the death tarot card, which is so common. In the movies, they pull out, and your future will be death. and it's like, dun, dun, dun. But the reality, of course, is the death in the tarot is symbolic of change.
Yeah.
Much like you have, in a lot of movies, you have symbolic death being towards the end, in the last sort of quarter, which is like the motivation or the inspiration to make that last change to win. Sometimes it's death of a dream, or a car breaks down. Sometimes it's quite literal, is that someone Noah actually does die. And but it's this whole movie was that metaphor, I think.
And therefore the title Awake. So wake up.
It's very, very cool from that point of view.
I reckon, I said it before, it's a bit of a hidden gem, this one. I know it's really new, and I'm not sure exactly how long it's been available on Netflix, but not long. I think it's a different premise. I'm glad you've brought up all of those kind of symbols of, the idea of, birth and afterlife and new life and all those kind of things. So I think that's really cool. So where does that then lead you into your ladder then, Surrey? Where are you putting Awake on your ladder?
Awake is going after passengers above Tau.
Okay. Awesome. And for me, it is going actually straight after Tau and before the Discovery.
The Discovery, Awake and Tau also is sort of... the AI gets rebooted and restarted. Yeah,
I think so. And the idea of Discovery as well is kind of going into the afterlife. So there's some symbols there together.
Yeah.
So I thought it was kind of a good story, but it's also a very different breakdown of society that I quite liked. So what about the science part? Are we talking about being awake, or are we being asleep?
Oh, yeah.
Or you're going to talk about something completely different, just solar flares.
Oh, solar flares are pretty interesting. And there's probably better movies we can talk about solar flares with.
Yeah.
But they were particularly popular during, say, the 70s. It was an imitation of the Navy. No, that's trousers with flares. Oh, sorry. No.
Flares,
sleep.
yes.
And it's particularly interesting that we watched this film and all about sleep when just earlier, last week, I went and had dinner with my brother and his family. And he was saying that, yeah, it's sort of, at the moment, he's sort of getting by in about 6 hours of sleep. Mm-hmm. And he's finding, he's surprised that he doesn't feel that bad. And this reminded me immediately of this research I read, because I was looking into how much sleep we need.
Yep.
This stems from earlier times where I went along to like a business coaching training session thing, and there was talk there about, waking up earlier.
Yep.
But there was no mention of going to bed earlier, which I always thought funny. Was like, I'm assuming that's what you meant to do, was actually wake up earlier and go to bed earlier, saying that the idea being that with that early start, you feel like you're getting ahead of the game rather than trying to catch up at the end of the day. Okay, but I thought, out of curiosity, well, how much extra can you get in a day, really? Like, how much sleep do you need? And I came across this great bit of research. So it's called The Cumulative Cost of Additional Wakefulness, Dose-Response Effects on Neurobehavioral Functions and Sleep Physiology from Chronic Sleep Restriction and Total Sleep Deprivation.
Nice.
It's quite a mouthful. How do they
That
come
is
up
the
with
title.
titles? It's by Hans P.A. van Dongen, Greg Meisland, Janet M. Mullington, David F. Dingers. Just to summarise this, what they did is they're looking at going, okay, so how does total sleep deprivation and various levels of sleep affect us? And that's exactly what my question was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So they took 48 people, and this is not a huge sample, but it was still, really good results. There are lots of other studies and cross studies of tens of thousands of sleep studies and people and so forth about how much sleep is usual and all the rest of it. 8 hours, apparently. Basically, the answer is 8 hours. Some people vary a little bit here and there, but not really less than 7, not more than about 9, 8 hours.
Yep.
Unless you've got some sort of disorder or other effect.
Yep.
But anyway, that's not what they're asking here. They're asking, let's find out different things. So they got these 48 people, and they broke it up into a couple of different experiments. The first one, 2 weeks, 14 consecutive days. They broke the people up into randomly broke them up into 3 groups. One got 4 hours a night, one got 6 hours, one got 8 hours. And then they did that. And in the meantime, they then did various cognitive and behavioural tests and monitoring. And they got them to fill in questionnaires like, how tired do you feel? How alert do you feel?
And funny enough, the 4 hours a night, people just went totally nuts on each other.
Well, then they turned around and went, okay, now you'll have 3 days of just ordinary sleep, and we'll do your tests. 3 days, 0 sleep. Not allowed to sleep at all for 3 consecutive days.
Wow.
And then 3 recovery days.
Right.
And they got them to do all these tests and stuff in between there to see how they're going.
Yep.
So the really interesting stuff came in. So the 4 hours per day, they felt crap, did poorly, very quickly degraded in their abilities to think and reason. And so, as you'd expect, they just felt like rat shit.
Pretty average.
8 hours, again, as you'd expect, totally fine. Like they're going, is this good? They behaved the same as they did on their baseline.
Yep.
Just like you'd expect. The 6 hours, because this is the question is, can you squeeze more time out? Can you go sleep 6 hours? My brother mentioned that he'd been sleeping 6 hours a lot lately, and he was feeling okay, and he thought, oh, that's kind of handy because, he swaps between day shift and night shift. He has a few other things and whatever. The 6 hour sleep people, for the first week, they were okay. They were a little bit off their game, but not too bad. And they reported that they felt, a little bit tired, but okay. After 10 consecutive days at 6 hours sleep, they still reported that they felt okay.
Yep.
A little bit tired, but entirely manageable. But their test results, so cognitive function, behavioural function, and so forth, the same as the people who were deprived for 3 days. So at that sort of 10 to 14 days, they were stuffed. So it's not absolutely incontrovertible proof that this is the case, but this is really strong indication that at 6 hours of sleep a night, you will feel okay.
Yeah.
But if you are tested, particularly after about a week or so, if you have to make difficult decisions, if you have to operate heavy machinery, if you have to, deal with emotionally charged or stressful situations, you will do as well as someone who has not slept for 3 days.
Wow.
So you just think of how will you do after not sleeping for 1 day. Like I've tried it. You just don't do very well at all.
No, you don't.
Try that for 3 days, and that's how you but you'll feel okay.
Yep.
You'll be able to convince yourself that you're doing okay. So that was just, it's an amazing bit of research, I think, because of that 6 hour cohort.
Yes. And
I can attest to this likewise. Like my brother said, it reflected what I had previously said, where I realized you can go for about a week of about 6 hours sleep a night. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're not sort of challenged, you're okay.
Yep.
I've never really gone for like the 2 weeks, but I could imagine then, 2 weeks you'd still be feeling that way. But I can only imagine that you're just not going to be making good decisions.
Yes.
So the other question that I had, and I'm sure we all want to know, how can we die? How can we die? Can we die from sleep deprivation? It has never happened.
Right.
So it's not to say that it's impossible. It's just that no one's been able to stay awake long enough.
Yeah.
Because we start entering this grey area of what is sleep. So this one guy, in 1965, this fellow Randy Gardner, he did a science experiment for his high school science project. He was 16, and he stayed awake for 11 days and 24 minutes. During this time, he was closely monitored by fellow students and sleep scientists. And as the days rolled on, his symptoms worsened, but he survived.
Yep.
But then some questions were raised. For example, there were times there by the end of on day 4 he started getting hallucinations and delusions. By day 7 he was slurring his speech. His memory was really bad. Day 10, paranoia was kicking in.
Yep.
And day 11, his facial expression and tone of voice became expressionless. Both his attention and memory span
I can understand that.
were significantly diminished. Which is where then, of course, scientists ask, well, what is awake? What is asleep?
Yeah.
Because after 11 days, if he's not expressing facial expression, maybe he's kind of entering a bit of sleep. Maybe there's a certain point where your body just goes, nah.
No, it's enough.
That's it, you're done.
I'm switching off,
And I couldn't imagine trying to go 11 days. Like, I've gone 24. I've gone maybe say 36-ish hours or 30 hours before. Mainly because at uni I would stay up a little bit later each day.
Yep.
And then wake up a bit later, and so you'd end up creeping until I'm watching Rage at 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun's coming up, and I'm going, oh really? The sun's up. I've been awake all night and stuff. I should go to sleep. And then you think, I can't. If the sunlight's up.
Yeah.
And in fact, sun does, modify your circadian rhythm.
It does wake you
part
up.
Of the way it tells you when you can and can't sleep. Which is why shift work is really difficult, because you try and sleep during the day and you can't. Also, when you live in a cave, there's this guy who lived in a cave. Your days become really long because you have no sunlight at all. You don't know when it's daytime, and your body just makes you sleep.
Yeah.
So, like this guy living in the cave, he was sleeping for 18 hours at a stretch. And his days, he thought he'd been down there for, 5 days, but he'd really been down there for like 7. He'd slept most of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other side of that is the... Jesus Christ, what was I saying? I got so caught up on this sleeping. Yeah, so I'd see the sunrise.
Yeah.
And I'd go, okay, well, I'm going to have to reset myself. So I'll stay up until sort of the afternoon, evening, and then, go to sleep. And then you sleep through till the morning, and you're quite refreshed.
Yeah.
That's the other thing this research found. There's those 3 recovery days. They found that people return with good health. And indeed, Randy Gardner here, after his 11 days of wakefulness, he had a really good sleep, like most of a day. He woke up in the morning. He was basically fine with no apparent ill health. So there's no evidence or reason to believe that people can die from lack of sleep.
Yeah, right.
However, they can experience accidents because they're basically sleep. They really kind of are inattentive.
Yeah.
There are some disorders, for example, familial fatal insomnia, which is a genetic disorder which causes lack of sleep. And one patient was awake for like 3 months, didn't sleep. They died, though, from organ failure due to the neurodegenerative nature of that disease. So they're still, even after 3 months of this disease, had not died for lack of sleep. They died because they had a disease that slowly dissolved their nervous system, basically.
It's a funny one. I mean, a bit like you're talking about uni days with editing film, because we only had access to machines on like a roster. You started to get into this weird thing of like, I can clock on at 2. I can do the shift, which is 2 to 6. And so you start doing that. And then what you just said, Zach, exactly right. Like once you do that a few nights in a row, I mean, you're a bit like night shift worker, but then you might have been able to have a shift in the afternoon one day, or maybe then on the Friday you could go in at 8 p.m. and then you could stay till 4 a.m. sort of thing. But you were like, you either tried to sleep a few hours during the day and then you're like, or I'll just stay up and keep editing, or I'll keep going. And I remember that there was a couple of times that, it probably was something about like 30, 34 hours. I remember that food becoming a bit tasteless at some point. Like, to begin with, it can be very satisfying. Like, you eat something like a bacon and egg burger or something, and it's like, this is the best thing ever. But I think you get to sort of about 30 hours, and then it's almost like you could have that same thing and go, it's not really tasty. Like, it was like I was losing my taste buds.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of losing the joy in food. But I think a lot of that is all your brain trying to literally say, go to bed. Go to sleep, right? Like, reset yourself.
Well, the theory of dying of lack of sleep, though, comes about from an earlier experiment where... what was the guy's name? Oh, I don't remember his name. There we go. In the 1980s, Rechtschaffen. So some German fellow, of course. He grabbed a bunch of rats, stuck them on a disc which could rotate with a wall over a pool of water. So the idea is that the rats would sort of scurry about doing whatever, and when they stopped and sort of went to try and have a sleep on the disc would rotate, and just this little wall would give them a bit of a bump and threaten to knock them in the water.
Hell, that would be hell, yeah.
And after about 2 weeks or something, 3 weeks, they died. 2-3 weeks,
no wonder.
they died.
Well, that's not just waking, that's torture, isn't it?
Yeah, and so he's going, well, there you go.
Yeah.
However, trying to repeat this experiment with rats, but using different ways of keeping them awake, they didn't die.
Yeah, right.
And then they were doing the same experiment with the turn disc with pigeons, for example. The pigeons didn't care at all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they're a bit miffed at being bumped all the time, but they never died. Yeah, so we don't... even though this movie, however, is putting that situation where you can't sleep. Something has damaged your brain.
Yeah.
Which would be more like that familial fatal insomnia, which is where their nervous systems were probably breaking down more so than the lack of sleep was necessarily killing them.
Yeah.
And then you've also got all the accidents and the paranoia and the, tripping over and smashing your head and not being able to get up because you're just too exhausted.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, this film, the suggestion actually is none of them are actually dying just from lack of sleep. It's from other humans.
We still didn't really see that. I could well imagine... I could imagine that situation you said, for example, where you essentially become... So, like at 11 days, this Randy Gardner guy was basically a zombie.
Yeah.
And you could imagine if he was not actually able to have sleep, like there was something broken there, you could well imagine then that, he would eventually just be so apathetic that he would just sit there, perhaps even suicidal, depression.
Yeah.
It sort of doesn't really matter how you die from lack of sleep, whether it's actually from the lack of sleep or all the associated side effects.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know that I really care to find out either way.
No, we're going to start right now until our next episode of Space Brains.
Well, the funny thing is, the reason I was so tired when I was watching this film was because I got a spasm behind my shoulder blade from the gym, trying to be healthy, and then you make yourself unhealthy. I wasn't doing anything in particular. I think it must have just been the way I picked up a weight or something. And who knows? I'm old. It happens. And so lying there, every time I shifted my head a certain way, it was a sharp
wake
pain.
you up. It was the pigeon thing.
Kept me awake. I was like the rat on the wheel,
Yeah.
and so I was very tired.
Yeah.
Very tired.
And that's what happens, folks. Okay, so stay awake and you can find out what is our next episode of Space Brains, which it is a classic. But tell us what you thought about what we said about Awake. Go check it out. It's a new film on Netflix. As I've kind of said a couple of times tonight, it's a bit of a hidden gem. Let us know what you think about it. You know, the stuff we touched on that Surrey was talking about, you know, the symbolicness of being awake, being rebirthed in the water, coming back around, looking at the world differently, critical thinking. Did you agree with that stuff or did you disagree? Did you have your own interpretation? And you can hit us up on any of our social media or our website and let us know what you thought about Awake. So for our next episode, we are looking at...
The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956 version. So this is the original. This film is one of our classics. And
It is.
one of the reasons we're choosing it as a classic is it has been remade so many times.
It must be a classic.
I mean, not only just as remade as Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
No, it's also very influential
but
on a whole bunch
so
of
many
other
other
stuff.
films have this same concept of
do.
people being taken. I mean,
Yeah.
The Thing, for example,
Yeah.
is basically Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
It is.
Made all Cronenberg-y.
Yeah.
And it's like, although Cronenberg didn't do that one, that was John Carpenter.
Yeah, I was
Cronenberg
just
did
gonna
The
say.
Fly.
Fly, yeah.
We'll do The Fly another time.
Yeah, we will. So, yeah, go hit it up. It's an old movie, but it's a goodie, and so it goes onto our classic list, and we'll be taking a deep dive on why it is a classic. Check out all our details. Make sure you, if you're interested, go make a sci-fi film for our Sci-Fi Film Festival. And until next time,
So, yeah.
bye.